Hi dear student, I hope all of you are happy and safe. So let's have a quick revision of the object-oriented programming class. I am trying to revise some of the basic concepts that we have already studied so that later on when we start the classes then it will be easy for all of you to continue from the same point where we have left. So let's start. So what is object-oriented programming? So object-oriented programming is actually deals with a real life things. As all of you know that the whole universe is made of objects. Okay, everything in this universe is object. So and all these objects are later on interacting with each other. So the objective of object oriented programming is that to really deal with the real world things. For example, if we have an ATM machine, okay, then this ATM machine is connected with the customers and with the technician, and at the back of this ATM machine is a bank. So this customer and ATM machine, you see the customer is an object. So this object, the customer is object, and in the same way another person who is a technician, that is also an object. The ATM machine by itself is an object and the bank is an object. So you see all these are objects, but these are interacting in different way. For example, you see the customer may need to check a balance. The customer may be deposit some fund, or maybe he or she will withdraw some cash, or the customer will transfer fund. And in the same way the technician sometime may need to repair the ATM machine, okay, or some other maintenance task. So you see all these are objects. The customer is object, the technician, the ATM machine, the bank, but all these objects are interacting with each other to perform real world activities. Okay, so if you look at all these objects, every object has properties also, but these are the functions. Okay, these are the functions that they are interacting with each other. So meaning to say, every object in this real world can only interact through their functions. Okay, so object oriented programming means, and the objective is that we need such a programming style that actually cover the real world uh, activities and the real world um, the real world activities that can really represent what we are doing in our daily life. So if object oriented programming is actually covering what is happening in this universe. So if we don't have the object oriented concept, that we cannot represent what we are actually doing every day, the business, the all the activities that we are doing. Okay, so this is the functionality and the objective of object oriented programming, that we need such a style of programming that actually cover the real world in the form of real objects and real which have properties and functionalities to interact with each other. So object oriented programming has four pillars. The first pillar is abstraction, the second pillar is an encapsulation, the third pillar is inheritance, and the fourth pillar is polymorphism. And the whole object oriented programming, the whole structure is made of these four pillars. So we will discuss about all these, and we will cover the whole course is related about all these pillars, and we will discuss each one in detail. Okay, so for example, what is meant by abstraction? Abstraction is actually a general view of something. By general view I mean that if you don't go in too much detail, you are just describing something very briefly. So that brief description is called abstraction. Like for example, we are mostly using in our daily life that give me some highlights, are just the facts please, meaning to say don't go in detail, just the facts are the the bullet points. Okay, so if you represent something in briefly, that is called abstraction. If look at this example, for example, if we have like this, that you see a book may have a lot of properties. The book may have ISBN, it may have publishing date, okay, the publisher, which in which country it has been published, it may be price, its category, author, and the book name, and maybe many more properties. But if you want to have abstraction, so abstraction is like a filter. When you filter all these information, then maybe you will have to select some important one that you like at that time, or you need at that time. Okay, so when you when you pass all these information through a filter, then you will have to select important one that you need. For example, the book ISBN, book author, and book name, and book price. So you see, when you pass something, when you pass some real world object which have many properties, and you select some brief information, some brief information of that object, this process is called abstraction. So about every activity, every object that you are planning for programming, okay, so you need to this ability that how to describe something briefly. Then this property, this ability is called abstraction. And the abstraction is in object oriented programming, it is in two ways. One way, the abstraction will be in their properties, okay, like all these are properties. And similarly, the abstraction will is possible in functionality also. So maybe some object will have a lot of functionality, but you only need few of them. Then you will have select few of the functions and will put in your class. So this is called abstraction. These are the two definitions of abstraction. For example, a view of a problem that extract the essential information relevant to a particular purpose and ignore the remaining of information. So you see, uh, you just pick up few information which is relevant to the problem that you are looking for. Okay, so you just pick up relevant information and ignore the details one. The second definition, that abstraction is the selective examination of certain aspect of a problem. The goal of abstraction is to isolate those aspects that are important, okay, and important for that purpose, and suppress those aspects which are unimportant for you. So you see, you will pick up some object, it will have many properties, but you select only those properties and those functionalities that is important for you for that time. So this process is called abstraction. Okay, so why we need classes and why we need objects, we will study actually all these things in detail. The whole course, the rest of the whole course will be about classes and objects and different properties of objects and different properties of classes. So what is meant by class and what is meant by object, we will study about this. And data and methods of a class, create our own class and objects, we will create practically, we will do all these things. And then accessing the data and methods of a class, how to access different ways, how to access from one class to another class, how to access from outside of the class. Okay, all these properties and all these aspects of class and objects we will go in detail. And why we need class is, as we discussed in the previous example, that we actually need a class for this purpose, to represent real world objects. All these are books, the Alchemist, the other book, and the other book, all these are books. Okay, so all these are objects. Each book has properties, each book has functionality. So all these are objects. Okay, so every object. But if someone asks you that all these objects are of what category, then we can say that all these objects are of category of book. So here the class is like a category. So for example, you have different objects, books, students, other thing. So you can, when you think, oh, some specific object belong to what category, so that category will be actually the class. Okay, so then the next step comes that, okay, how to represent the class. Then the abstraction comes in. Then you will think, okay, how I can briefly represent any object of type book. Okay, so the brief description of each book is like this, like a title, author, publication date, and price. Okay, so you see now all these object has all these properties: the title, the author name, the publication date, and the price. Each book has this property. But so the general description is the class. Okay, it is quite general. But if you go to particular object, then each object has different value for each general property. For example, for the title, okay, so each object has different title. For the author, each object has different author and different publication date and different price. So it means the class is the general representation of the objects, but each object is uh, unique, and each object has unique values and different from other objects. Okay, so class is like a just like a blueprint, a general description of the objects. Okay, so why we need classes? We need actually the classes are very easy to maintain when we define a class. Okay, so it's very easy to modify the class, and that modification easily apply on all of the objects related to that class. Okay, and when you define another reason that why we need classes, actually the classes looks very real. Okay, for example, if you want to store all the information about books without class and without objects, then you know that you will have to declare so many arrays. For example, an array for all the titles, an array for all the authors, an array for all the prices, and then actually each array is a separate entity. It is not combined into one. It doesn't looks like one real object. And when later on when you are trying to modify, then that modification actually is very difficult to do it. Okay, so these are the basic reasons that why we need classes and objects. The easy definition that actually classes and objects looks real, easy to maintain. Okay, why easy to maintain? Because the properties are in a separate area, the functionalities are in separate area. So if you change a function, let's suppose in a class, that change reflects to all the objects belongs to that class. And without object oriented programming, without class style programming, you will have to change each piece of information individually, and sometimes it is very difficult in real professional projects. That project will have thousands of lines of code. So if you have thousands lines of code and you are trying to debug and you are going line by line, it is really very difficult. And if you have a classes style, that is very easy. Okay, so we will discuss all this in much more detail. So class, what is a class? Class is like a structure. So struct we have discussed last year, but if you don't remember, no, don't worry, no problem. So class is a blueprint, is a brief description of real world objects, and their descriptions are in two ways: properties and functionalities. Okay, and when we define the class completely, then later on we create variables of that class. That variables are instances, are called objects of that class. It's like a blueprint. So you see, if let's suppose we have a blueprint print like a map, planning of some house, so this will be the class. And when we really create or build houses of this blueprint, then the real houses will be called objects, and the planning, the blueprint is called the class of this one. So each class has attributes. Attributes are the data members. Okay, and methods. So the methods are also called behaviors. The methods are the functions that we define in a class. Okay, so mostly the data members are in a private area, uh, where it is in these properties are inaccessible from outside the class. And when they are inaccessible, actually we are hiding the data, and this mechanism is called encapsulation. Okay, if you remember, there are four pillars of object oriented programming: data abstraction, in data abstraction, encapsulation, inheritance, and polymorphism. Okay, so the encapsulation is the hiding of data by restricting access from outside, and that can be achieved by applying the private and protected words. When we apply that on the class, then it changes the way how it will be accessed from outside the class. And the public interface is actually the functions that we define inside the class. So through the functions, one object can interact with other objects, or one object can interact with the main program, our main program can interact with the objects. So this is a public interface. Like in the previous example, the ATM, the customer, and the technician, and the bank. So all these are objects, but actually when they are interacting with each other, they are only interacting through functionality, like withdraw some amount. So when then the customer will come and insert the ATM card, and then we'll click the functionalities, okay, of withdraw. And when the withdraw function is called, actually it will be connected at the back to the bank, and inside the bank there will be other transactions, other functions will be called to complete the whole task. So meaning to say, different objects interact with each other through functions, and the functions are called public interface of the class. Okay, this is the general format of the class. We will study okay, we will study through a practical example. Later on I am writing a practical example. You will see that how we are defining the private area, the properties and the functions. But this is a general blueprint. Like a class, every class must start with the word class, and it must have a name, like a name of the class, like for example book. Okay, and then there will be two curly braces, at the end will be semicolon. Inside these two curly braces will be the properties and the functions of the class, like this one. Okay, so the access specifiers means how to use the private keyword, the protected keyword, and the public keyword. Okay, so public keyword means it is general, it is visible from different places, and it is accessible from outside. Okay, and private can only be called or accessed by the functions. So you see, the public function will access the private data. So the function and the data both belong to the same object, so only its own function can access its private data. Any other program cannot access. So in this way we are hiding the data. So you see the properties are in the private area here, and the functions are in the public area. So this is the public interface which will be called from main program. We will see in real example later on. Okay, it means that the private and the public can be listed in any order. It is not necessary that you will must write the private first and then the public first, the public second. No, you can actually write the public first. If you want, you can write the private after that. Okay, you can you can have a series of also, for example, first private, then public, then again private, then again public. You can do as many blocks as you want. Okay, the word const is used to make the function unchangeable. Const meaning to say that this function will not change any value. This can only do the functionality for what purpose it has been defined. Okay, so this function will be not allowed to change any values. So such function which is not used for changing or for applying some functionality, then mostly we are using that function as a const. Okay, and this const word word is, this functionality is actually quite common. You can apply on function also, and you can apply on variable also. Okay, so defining a member function will be like this. So there are two ways how to define a member function. One way to define the member function inside the class. So if you are defining inside the class, then no need to use scope resolution operator. But if you are defining the class outside the class, if you are defining the function outside the class, then you will have to use the scope resolution operator. Scope resolution operators are two colons, like four dots like this. So the scope resolution operator, what's the purpose of this? It actually links the function with the class. So like here, for example, the first word int is the return type of the function. The rectangle is the name of the class. The scope resolution operator will link this function. The function name is what? Set width. So the set width function belongs to this rectangle class. So this scope resolution operator play the role to link each function with its specific class. Maybe there will be many functions, hundreds and thousands of functions are possible in a real project. So how to link each function with its specific class using scope resolution operator. Okay, some functions are mutator and some functions are accessors. Mutator functions are those functions which are used to modify the value, which apply some functionality on the variables, on the private data that we have defined. So such functions are called mutators, and it is mostly like set data, set data, or set variables, or set the values. Okay. And accessor functions are mostly such functions which don't apply any operation, which are only used for reading purpose, for displaying purpose. That functions are called accessors, and this is why it doesn't apply any functionality, or it doesn't modify the data. So therefore mostly we are using as a const. Okay, so defining instance of a class, yeah. So I think we should we should go through one example. Then you can realize all these things clearly. Let's create a class for the example that we have studied, like the book book one. So the first thing that we will have to use head sign include include IOStream. The second one we will include string also, and using namespace std. Okay, so the first word, when you are defining a class, the first word must be a word class, and after that the class name. In this case, for example, book. Okay, so then curly brace, and the body of the curly braces, and then semicolon. Okay, so this is the body uh, of a class. Inside this class we will have two different properties, uh, two different sections. One section will be hide, which we represent by private. Okay, so the word private you will use, after that colon, and then what private properties you want to define here, it will be under this category. For example, here we want to define a string value with the name of title, then semicolon. So the first one will be the data type, what type of value is it, then the name like title, and then semicolon. And again, data type, which is string, for the author name. Okay, so author, author, author. Okay, another one, a string value for the publication date, publication underscore date. This should be also a string value. For the price, we can use a double value. Okay, and then price. Okay, so you see, these are all the abstracted values that we want to define. The book may have many other properties, many other functions and properties, but we are only interested in this particular movement, only in these four values. So this is called abstraction, data abstraction. So after this, a public area. Okay, so in the public area we will define few functions. So now there are, again, you see, there are two ways to define the function. So one, first property, a function declaration. Okay, so what we need a function which will set all these values, the title, the author, the publication date, and the price. Okay, so it doesn't return any value to the main program, from the class to main program. This is why it is void. Okay, so void means this function is not returning any value. Okay, so void, then the function name set data. Okay, set data. So in this brackets will be the list of argument, how many arguments we will pass to this function. So actually it depends on the number of values that you want to set. So we want to set title, we want to set the author, we want to set the publication date, and we want to set the price. So we need four values here. So what are the types of these four values? The first one is string. Okay, here you can give any name. It may be different, because here it is a separate variable. It may be any name that you can give. Okay, so mostly give different from the actual values. Like a title, for title I will just use capital T, and then again string. The author name, for the author name maybe I will use capital A, then comma, then again string. For the publication date I will use, let's suppose, capital P, or capital D, let's suppose capital D, date. Okay, and the last one is a price. Okay, and it is double. Okay, so if it is double, then and I will use, let's suppose, D. So four arguments, three for string, three of type string, because the title is string, the author is string, the author name is string. Okay, and the date we are using as a string now, and the price will be double. Okay, so if you just, there are two ways. If you just want to declare the function here and define outside the class, I will write another example like that. So in that case you will put semicolon, and then at the end of the class you will have to define. But now we are trying to define the function inside the class. So we so this definition will be declaration also and definition also. So this is mostly called inline functions that we define inside the class. So what we are doing here, so now we are assigning all these arguments that will pass to this function to the actual values. The actual value is the title, so title equal to the first argument, capital T, semicolon. The author will be, these the author, the title, these are the all actual values that we have defined here in the private section. So the author equal to let's suppose here in this case a capital A. The publication date equal to uh, the D, the third parameter, and the price equal to the last parameter D. So you see in this case, when this function is called, it will have four arguments. The first argument for the title, the second argument for the author, the third argument for the date, and the fourth argument for the price. So the function will bring these values and will assign to the four private data that we have defined here. So next function we want to define is to display the value. So here again we don't want to return any value, so it will be void. Okay, any function which doesn't return value. Return value means that from here, you see now we are in a class, from here send values to main program. This is called returning value. So we are not returning any value to the main program, so we are using void. So this should be get data. Okay, get data. So in here this function is just displaying a value. It doesn't bringing any values, any arguments from main program to the class like the previous function. So therefore the bracket, the list of arguments will be empty, the brackets will be empty. So in the body of the function we are just displaying the values. For example, cout. Okay, cout. So sorry, the first one we are using simple function, sorry, simple text. Here you can give any value. For example, the book title, I will just simply type title. You can type anything, book title equal to, and after that the actual value. So you see in the quotation you can type anything. It may be different from the actual value here, but the second one, the actual thing that I want to display, this must be the same spelling that you have defined here in the private section. Okay, and after that new line ENDL. Okay, so again cout, again a text value, anything that we, for example, author name. Okay, author name. This again you can type any text. It may be different from the actual value that we have defined, but the second one must be the same that you want to display. So it should be author. Okay, so and then ENDL semicolon. Third one cout semi, then again a text. So publication date equal to, then this will be the same spelling, p underscore date. Okay, then the fourth one cout, again any text that you want to display, like price of the book or simple price. It's up to you, whatever you want to define. So then this will be the actual spelling, price. Okay, here was the all small letters, so here will be also all small letters. and then ENDL. Okay, so now the function is complete. Okay, so now we define both functions, the set data and the get data, both inside the class. What I mean, you see, by inside the class, this is the whole body of the class. So the private data and the two functions are inside the class. Okay, define the main program. Int main, okay, and then this is the int main program, the main driver function. Main program is called the driver function of C++. So let's suppose this is the template, like return 0. Okay, so in main program, what we are doing, we are creating objects. The first part was class, now we are creating objects. Okay, so how to create the objects? So you see here to create objects, you will have to define like mostly we are defining variables like int a, let's suppose, like this. Okay, but here we are defining objects of the class that we have defined, so it will be book. Okay, our class name is book. If you look at this, you see our class name is book here. So we are defining object of book. So let's suppose the first object is C++. So if you want to define many objects at the same time in one line, so you can create put comma, and after that you can create another book, let's suppose English. Okay, if you want to define more, but in this case I just want to define two objects, one C++, one English. So you see, we have defined general class, but the object of this general class are specific. Now one is C++ and one is English. So now we want to call the functions, the set the values of the title, the author, the publication date, and the price. So to set these values, we will have to call that function. So the how to call the object name dot set data. Okay, so this set data function will take here 4 values, and those 4 values will be sent to those private data members that we have defined. So the first value was title. So the title, let's suppose the C++ name is C++ objects through no control structure through objects. So this is a string value, it will be enclosed in double quotation. Then comma means next argument. Next argument is also a string value, so that is the author name. So in this case, like you can give any name. For example, let's suppose Gaudi. Okay, the third argument is the publication date, that is also a string value, so it will be enclosed in double quotation. Any string value must be enclosed in double quotation. Okay, so you can give any publication date, let's suppose like 20 and then June, and then let's suppose 2019. Okay, then comma, the fourth argument is the price. So let's suppose it is 25.5. okay, so 4 arguments completed, and then semicolon. So object dot the function and all the arguments that you want to pass to the private values. Okay, so the first argument will go to the first value like title, the second argument will go to the second value like author, and the third argument will go. So actually what happens, so here is the text value. This text value will go will go and will assign to this t variable, and then the t will assign to the title. The same goes for the second text value, which is Godi. Say Godi or Cody. Let's anyone. Okay, so this will, the second text value will assign to the second argument here to a, and this will assign to the other one, and so on, in this way. Okay, so we call the first function like this. Now let's call the second function to display the same values of this class. So C++ is the object name, object dot get data, and it is a function. Every function must have these brackets. Okay, so if it has argument, so you will have to type inside the argument. If don't have argument, then you will have to leave blank like this. So the get data function is just displaying, it doesn't get any argument, so we are using only for display purpose. So that's all. Let's run the program. I think there was some mistakes that I have already corrected. Maybe you have observed while I was typing. So let's run the program. Yeah, so you see this is the output of the program. The title is C++ control C++ control structure through objects. This is the same thing that what we have typed. Author name is Godi, publication date the same that we have typed, and the price is this one. So in this way you can actually call the same functions, maybe for the English one. Okay, English dot set data, and then English book name, English the date book author name, and the date publication date, and the price, and get data. So this way is the way that we define functions inside the class. If we want to define these functions outside the class, then what will be the procedure? Then the procedure will be like this, that like simply cut this component. I am cutting this one, you see here. So I just put semicolon here. Okay, so void set data and the 4 arguments and semicolon. So I will have to define this function outside the class. So outside the class, so the same thing, void return type first, void, and then the class name to link this function with the class. The class name is book. Okay, and then scope resolution operator, and after that the function name set data. Okay, set data and the 4 arguments. Okay, the same 4 argument, string, maybe you can here again, if you want, you can give different variable names. These are totally different thing. String t for the title, string a for the author, string d for the date, and double p for the price. Okay, and now I am pasting the same coding that previously we did there. You see here the body of the function. So the first argument t will assign to d, to title. The second argument will assign to author. The third argument will assign to publication date. So note this point, that these arguments may have any spelling, anything you can use. These are totally separate variable, but this variable, the title, must be the same that you have defined here in the private section. The author spelling must be the same that you have defined here in the private section, and the p date and the price. So these 4 are the same private variables that you have defined in the private section. So if you run this program again, it will have the same output. For example, let's run again. So the same output like previous time, but this time we define the functions outside the class. So to define the function outside the class, you will have to use the procedure is that then a return type, then the class name, then scope resolution operator, then the function name, and the list of arguments if this function has arguments. Okay, so if doesn't have arguments like the previous one, set data. Okay, so I am giving you this assignment to you, that you take it out this get data function outside the class and define here. So like here define, I will type for you here, you define the get data function outside the class, outside the class. So here this will be like your assignment I am leaving for you. Okay, so that's all for this example.